Welcome to Bat Therapy, psychology of Batman, superheroes, and other comic book characters. Be a fly on the wall or a bat in the cave, listening in on a friendship built out of a love for talking Batman, comics, and the everyday struggle to achieve mental health and happiness.
We are your hosts, clinical psychologist Dr. Amelia Brown and educator and comic aficionado Keaton Hopkins. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube and social media and find our Patreon at patreon.com/battherapy.
This podcast is about providing education and understanding and is not a replacement for mental health treatment or support. If you're needing help, go to bat-therapy.com for resources.
I am super excited because we're not doing a DC or Marvel comic this week, but we are doing something that's very, very dear to my heart. That is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Woohoo.
So I have always been a huge Ninja Turtles fan. Like my entire life, like since I could crawl. Like the original 1990s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie was actually filmed like 2 hours away from me in Wilmington, North
Really?
Carolina. Yeah, it was filmed in
Oh.
Wilmington. And I have the VHS tape of it still. And the paper box that it's in is like all beat up because when I was a baby, when I was little, I definitely chewed on it. And I still remember there was like a weird, funny Pizza Hut commercial that played at the beginning of the VHS. And so I've always just been a massive Ninja Turtles fan. One of my first Halloweens, I dressed as Michelangelo. And so we're covering the new movie, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. It's streaming on Paramount Plus. Streaming on Paramount Plus right now. I would definitely check it out. I absolutely loved it. It's so
very
good.
In fact, my parents, who are nerds, but the like Star Trek and, they're older generation nerds, like they actually really enjoyed the movie. So, and I don't hate me, people, but I didn't grow up on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I mean, I knew who they were, obviously, but like we started the movie and I was like, so how am I supposed to tell them apart? And Bill went, what do you mean? He was so heartbroken.
I would be heartbroken too.
Yeah. So admittedly, I do not have that long-standing history, but the movie is really, really good. And the style of it is really cool. Very Spider-Verse-y. They clearly took from that vibe in a great way.
My sister-in-law, she is also a huge Ninja Turtles fan. I mean, she knows the lore. If she sees a character, she can name it. Like, she is a massive Ninja Turtles fan. And so, like, we had talked about seeing this one together, and we just didn't get a chance to because the timing just didn't line up. But she's been giving my son all of her old Ninja Turtles toys.
Aww.
Yeah, it's very sweet. It's very sweet. And so, yeah, so huge Ninja Turtle family. My son walked in on me watching this movie and he was just like, when do I get to watch it? And I'm like, okay, you know what? You have a good day at daycare every day this week. And on Friday, me and you are going to watch this movie together.
Yeah. Bonus watch. I like it. I like it. So, okay. Why the love? What do you think has drawn you in for so many years?
So I think it's just like, it's one of those things where, one, it's the sheer ridiculousness of it, right? Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Like, if you're going to teach adjectives, I think this is the way to do it, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the absolute ridiculousness of it. But also, I mean, they have weapons and they're doing ninjutsu and like, it's just, and the villains are out of this world and spectacular. And like, it's just one of those things it appeals to the child soul, and my soul never grew up. And so, yeah, it's one of those things. But also, I think it's just, their story has always just been so wholesome. It's been very wholesome. And what's interesting is the backstory for the Ninja Turtles was like, so some ooze fell off it happens differently in all of
Sure.
the different movies and stuff, but basically I think the original one, some ooze falls into a sewer and it lands on the turtles and it makes them into humanoid. But here's what's funny: the same creator of Ninja Turtles is also the creator of Daredevil.
Hmm.
And in his backstory, after the chemical got
Yeah.
on Matt Murdock, it went into the sewer and
Oh.
it made the Ninja Turtles. And so they have a lot in common. Like Matt Murdock fights against the Hand.
Hmm.
The Ninja Turtles, they fight against Shredder, and Shredder's clan is called the Foot Clan.
Yeah.
And so like it's very the full story is actually really, really interesting. But yeah, I've always just absolutely love Ninja Turtles. They have cool technology. They have their turtle van. They also have a blimp, which isn't the best means of travel, but it's really cool. But yeah, it's one of those things. And this movie, I absolutely loved it because they did something very different. So it's always been called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles,
Yeah.
but most of the time they are 18, 19 years old, right?
Oh.
Like they're
So they're like adult teens.
yeah, they're adult teens. They're adult teens. This movie was very different because
Yeah.
they are young teenagers
Yeah.
in this,
Yeah.
and it's very clear, and I absolutely love it. The
There's
way,
definitely
yeah,
more there's definitely a kid vibe. I didn't realize, I mean, when I think of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I think of them as older, but I since I haven't watched, I just figured that I had missed all of the earlier stuff. So that's very interesting. Yeah, it was very wholesome and it was nice to see, they're going through what everyone goes through. They just want to be liked. And
yes,
and then they get themselves into trouble and actually goof things up because they're so desperate to be liked that they actually forget, oh, there's something bigger going on here.
and this hits with reality so well because I
Oh
mean
yeah.
we've been talking about heroes in training, and we talk about Batman so often. Batman is just locked in with tunnel vision on his mission for justice. The turtles just want to be loved, and
Yeah.
they really just want to be loved and accepted, and they love humanity. They love humanity despite their dad Splinter not loving humanity, which we're not even gonna. You asked me why I love Ninja Turtles. It's four turtles raised by a humanoid rat, and
It
they
was pretty adorable, I have to say,
isn't it
despite how
excellent?
ridiculous that sounds.
It's so excellent. It's
Yeah.
so excellent. Like there,
Like
I don't. Yeah,
when he was taking care of the little baby turtles and they were running around
wasn't it
and they were
cute?
being all toddlery and stuff. And then when he takes them out of the sewer and then people start being mean to him and one of the
Yeah,
turtles almost I forget which one, but one almost gets run over and you're like, "Oh my god." Like
yeah,
it's yeah, yeah,
yeah,
it's very much a father and his kids even though it's a rat and some turtles.
yeah. Absolute. No, absolutely. It 100% is like a very loving relationship, and just these four brothers that are just like getting each other through everyday life. And all four of them are so different, but they also have so much in common. And so
Mm,
I think it's one of those things. It just got popular because it was just it's all about brotherly love and camaraderie and like and it's fun because I mean on the playground, like there were always at least four guys, and it's like, all right, who's which Ninja Turtle? I was always a Leonardo guy, uh,
ah, the
myself.
leader.
I was always a Leonardo guy myself. But I don't know. At my age, I acted more like Raphael, if I'm being honest. you know. But yeah, it's one of those things. They really want to be loved, and it's an echoing theme throughout all of the Ninja Turtles films. I can't
That's what I
say
was
I've
wondering. I was wondering how much this was a specific story versus their vibe because yeah, it was just the whole thing was wanting to be connected to people and wanting to be seen for themselves and to be liked and
Mm-hmm.
have relationships and friends and school and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
that it sounds like that's a running theme throughout the entire
Yeah,
franchise.
they definitely they love New York, which is why I wore the shirt that I
That's
did. I
You
had
got an
to.
I Heart New York shirt on. Nice,
Yeah.
nice.
But yeah, they love New York, they love pizza, and they love people, but they also know that the average person would be afraid of them. And I love that in this movie, even when April is comfortable talking to them, they're just like, "Hey, do you think more people would be like you?" She's like, "No, absolutely not. They'd be terrified."
April is a fantastic character, by the
Isn't she
way.
great?
I love her so much. She's that bridge to the human world, and she's going through the same stuff,
Yeah.
but obviously not a turtle. She's a an
Yeah.
actual
And
kid.
so everyone is a lot younger in this. This is definitely a prequel, a
Okay.
prequel movie. They definitely showed some characters that you see later on in the cartoons and in the comics. Like they definitely show some characters that you see later on, but in very early stages in this movie. And so it's definitely a prequel. And so that's why I think when I first mentioned it to you, I was like, I feel like this would be really good as far as Heroes in Training goes. It's right up the alley for the theme
Oh
of
yeah, for sure.
of this.
Well, and so I don't think we've hit on this too much during this season, or maybe even past seasons, but there there is something to be said. So if you're okay, being a hero, you're not necessarily in the public eye. You're actually doing a lot of stuff that people don't see. But being a superhero or having some sort of special abilities or powers, I mean, yeah, some of them still try to work cloak and dagger and where people aren't going to see them, but there's always this sense of, especially when you're in training and you're figuring things out, what is your public persona going to be? What do you want that to look like?
Right.
And I think one of the really great things about this movie is it also shows that there's only so much of that that's under your control.
Right.
So they now granted they had missteps and they blundered a bit, uh but they weren't doing anything wrong and they were seen as a villain.
Right.
They weren't doing anything wrong and they were seen as a monster.
Right.
And so one of the things I like too is it focused on that piece of, I mean, there are things that you can do to affect how other people see you, and also you can become so consumed by that you actually become a shallower version of yourself and you don't end up being the very thing that you were trying to be in the first place. So like for them, they wanted people to see them as good, but they were so focused on it they weren't actually doing the good.
Right.
And they were actually struggling with the heroics because they were so worried. And so I really liked that. And surprisingly, we haven't really come across it as much in other heroes and training stuff that we've been doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think part of it too is because you're seeing this from the perspective of a freshman in high school or a
Mm-hmm.
sophomore in high school. Like you're seeing it from their perspective, and so some of the emotions they don't even know how to go about handling it. They don't even, they're
Great
just
point.
like, I know how I feel right now, and I'm gonna go punch something. Like I don't know. Like even they make quite a few jokes about Raphael, and they're like, we should get you into therapy.
I know. I thought that was cute.
Yeah.
I it reminds me of like not memes, but those little things. It's like the boomers. Maybe they should go. And then it's the millennial. Yeah, and I was talking to my therapist. I love how they were throwing that in there and like maybe you should talk to someone about that anger, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's another piece is I think you have to pay a little bit more attention. There's a lot going on in this movie. So in my personal opinion, the differences between them happen. You have to catch them. They're these quick moments at a lot of times. Like
Hmm.
you get your foundation of who they are, but then a lot of stuff's going on. So you do have to pay attention for those moments where you see it. But I like their different reactions to things.
Yes.
It and none of them were wrong or bad. It's just that different people, and they even had the same growing up, they had the same history. But fundamentally, who they were, as I was going to say, as people, as turtles, I guess, as turtle people, peoply turtles, I don't know.
Mhm.
But who they were fundamentally also affected how they reacted. And because of that, different turtles needed different things. And you
Right.
even saw they all wanted different things from humanity.
Yeah.
Who wanted to be in school, who wanted to have a romantic, partner, who wanted, yeah, they had all different sorts of things that they wanted, different reactions, even though they grew up in the exact same set of circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's even more interesting is those circumstances they grew up in were under a father that very much shunned humanity.
Yeah.
So it's honestly quite impressive that they overcame that so easily. Because, like, when I feel like when we're growing up, our parents end up instilling in us the same fears that they have, the same worries that they have. It's and I mean, if you want to put it on the simplest level, it's something as simple as look both ways before you cross the street,
Yep.
right? Because that was the level that Splinter put watch out for humans on. It was like, no, this is something you need to know. Like if you see a snake, don't touch it.
Yep.
If you don't stick a fork in the electrical outlet. Like these are things that could save your life. Stop, drop, and roll.
Yep.
Those lessons that our parents taught us, that's the level that Splinter was saying,
True.
watch out for humans.
And here's the thing that gives me pause with what you're saying, because yes. And also, as much as you try to instill these lessons and messages and history, sometimes things just don't stick until you live through it yourself. Like, I
That's
mean,
true.
how many people still touch the hot stove even though they were told not to?
That's true.
And and once again, their different personalities are more likely to say, okay, I was given this and so I'm going to go with it. Others are more of the testing and where's the line, or um I want to experience the thing. And I think also it's a really good sense too of, because you're talking about these very immediate dangers,
Hmm.
and yet here, even though it was taught to them that way, they know it's not as simple as if you touch a fire, it's hot.
Right.
Because they're also the ones going out and doing the chores that are out and about. They go into the grocery store, they get the food, they're going out and finding these things. So they have chances to observe and to be close and realize, hey, what dad's saying, it's not as simple as that. They have these chances to observe, and they're realizing things are a little bit more complex, and they didn't live through what their dad lived through. And so it's not quite hitting them in the same way. And that's, I mean, that's tough on all sides.
It is. It is. And the thing is, what they want is so simple. And from a certain point, it makes sense because they're also so young. Like they're not even
Mm,
looking at like as big of a picture as their dad. They're just saying, "Hey, we love people and we want people to
mm-hmm.
love us." It kind of reminded me a little bit of like social media influencers, how it's like they're just like constant like I'm going to do this and
Mm,
hopefully I get tons of likes and tons of followers.
yep.
People comment about how much they love me, and this is certainly not the same thing, but it did make me kind of think about it because they were just like willing to do anything to be loved by the general public. It wasn't even something like, hey, we want our own small circle of friends. They just want to be accepted
Yeah.
in the world the way that they are.
Yeah. So you said they just want something simple. It sounds simple. It's not. I,
Right.
so for a good chunk of people, you're close enough to the norm. You have your differences, but you're close enough where a lot of things might automatically be accepted in a number of circumstances. There are probably people out there that can relate to feeling like a Teenage Mutant Ninja version of a turtle
Right.
trying to make it out with people. And I know that's not what you meant. Like it seems like such a simple thing. Just, hey, we want to go out there. We want people to think, be cool with us. Yeah, I feel like somewhere in between them and their dad was the truth, where just there's no going around it. They are very different.
Yeah. There's a,
And
oh,
and there's a lot to overcome.
yes.
And there are people who can overcome and say, "You know what? Cool. What can you do?" Like April.
Right. And one of the lines, I think Michelangelo is the one that says it. It's so sad, but it's such a good line in the movie. He's just talking to his brothers and he goes, "Hey guys, if we weren't monsters that were shunned by society and we could do whatever we want, what would you guys do?" Like it was just so sad because it's like, okay, they get it. They definitely understand what's going on. And
Keaton, I just had a realization.
what?
It's like your childhood version of your love of Killer Croc.
Yeah,
Aw.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. You just
yeah.
want to be, and so it, but it's one of those. It's one of those things where it's just, yeah, they're, yeah, very much the same. It's like, okay, this they just want to be loved, and it's something where you can't fully blame society because it's something that they're just not used to. It's something that they
Mm,
are terrified of. And it's something, if it's one thing that humans are professionals at, it's being afraid of what they don't understand.
mm. Well, and I think you're hitting on something key is that their dad is they're dangerous and they're out to milk you, which ironically does happen. But the that whole storyline was hilarious.
It's great.
So he sees it as they are dangerous and they're out to harm you. And you're right. So for some people that's what you're going to see on the outside. But a lot of it is fear and misunderstanding. And I agree with you. So a lot of times in therapy we try and really hit home for people. There's it's not necessarily something wrong with a feeling or reaction you have, or you don't necessarily have control over those things. You can influence how you might react in certain ways, but if you feel anger, if you feel fear, those are feelings. What do you do with it though? And
Mm,
so I think that's the piece that their dad was truly afraid of, is that when people reacted around him, it turned into a very dangerous situation.
yeah.
um but yeah, you're right. That fear underlying everything. Okay, so what do we do with it? And so April is a very inquisitive person, and granted had her own what we call secondary motivations.
Yeah.
She wants to find the cool story and get out there as a newscaster and whatever.
Yeah.
And so she's inquisitive and interested. And so clearly she's not just cool with them from the get-go, but she's willing to get past any initial fear or uncertainty or discomfort that she's feeling.
Yeah.
Not everyone's going to be willing to do that. And so yeah, that's really tricky. And honestly, for a bunch of mutated turtles, like I don't who knows? Who knows how much of society would be able to take them in or not. Now here's the
Right.
thing. I get their obsession with get people to love us, get them to see us as good, and we want them on our side. Because yeah, if you can show them that you're of use to them in some way, like the heroics is a super smart way of doing it.
Right.
How do we show them that our differences are to their benefit? Because, I mean, unfortunately, like we like to think that we'd just be understanding, but it helps. It doesn't hurt if you're you're able to go out there and make the world a safer place. People are
Right.
going to be more likely to want to understand you better then.
Right. And you know, in this movie, and it's a recurring theme. We've seen it so many times, especially when it comes to superheroes. The other side of the coin, where it's like someone that was forgotten just can't forgive.
Oh,
And with this character Superfly, he kind of he reminded me of Magneto. Uh
yeah, totally. I mean, isn't that the whole storyline
yeah,
from Wow, I didn't even think about how
yeah,
that's the
yeah. The first
storyline
X-Men movie,
from the
yeah,
first
it
X-Men
is. Yeah,
movie.
it.
Let's turn everybody into,
Yeah,
well, I guess slightly different.
yeah. But
But yeah,
but
let's
yeah,
turn everything
still.
into a mutant that we
I mean,
can.
even Mutant, the word's there. It's right there.
Yeah. Yeah, it was right there.
But yeah, Superfly, who I'm not gonna lie, Ice Cube did absolutely great as him. The
Oh my
voice,
god, he was
the
so
voice
great.
cast in this movie
So
was
good.
great. The actress that plays Naja in What We Do in the Shadows actually played a mutant bat, and that just made me way too happy. I love that show. Uh, but yeah,
Jackie
the
Chan was their
yeah,
dad.
Jackie Chan was Master Splinter. It was so good,
Yeah.
so good. Yeah, the voice cast was just phenomenal. I loved this movie. Like I cannot wait to watch it again. But yeah, but Superfly is like, okay, his father, his creator,
Mm,
was killed at the beginning, and he grew up alone and shunned, and he grew up with a chip on his shoulder that just grew and grew and grew and grew. And he had his own squad of people that felt the same way. And this is where it gets interesting because it kind of reminds me of when people fall into certain crowds
mm,
of even, and it can be even of extremists because of something bad that might have occurred in their life. They
yeah,
turn to end up becoming the very thing that they did not like, right?
yeah.
And that's what happened because these other mutants that Superfly basically recruited on his team were people that were mutants that also felt shunned by society, but
And once
they,
again, probably were.
yes, absolutely. And they didn't have the same nurturing
Yeah,
that the turtles did, because they would be in a very similar situation had Splinter, instead of saying let's hide from humanity, let's hate humanity. And
true.
Splinter even recognizes that. He's like, I cannot be the same way that Superfly is.
Well, and Superfly was raised by someone who was desperately alone.
Baxter
And
Stockman, who is a character in the comics and TV show, they did it a little
oh,
bit different because in the show he actually is the one that becomes a fly.
oh, interesting.
Yeah, he
Okay, okay,
actually
okay.
becomes a fly, and less gross than the Jeff Goldblum movie, certainly. Way less gross
Oh my
than
god,
that.
Jeff Goldblum. Oh yes, I know what movie you're talking about. God, I forgot about
It's
that
the
movie.
most disgusting movie I've ever seen. The Fly is such a gross movie. I can't. I cannot. I love Jeff Goldblum. He is a national treasure. He should be on Mount Rushmore, but that movie is disgusting.
But we'll watch different
Yeah.
movies.
Yes. But yeah, like, and so yeah, they did a lot of things different in this, because
Okay.
normally Bebop and Rocksteady, the Warthog and the Rhino, they're
Uh-huh.
normally Shredder's main henchmen. And
Ah.
so they did a lot of stuff in this that was really fun, and it made it more wholesome because these
Yeah,
mutants,
yeah,
this group of mutants, they end up kind of seeing the light, and they all they all
yeah,
go over with the turtles like,
yeah,
hey, yeah, we've been shunned by society, but we have each other. And that was
yep,
one thing that
yep,
I really loved. They always had
yeah.
each other.
Well, and here's the thing too. So okay, so you have Superfly, you have the turtles. Both now, granted, the turtles were raised their whole lives by someone who always felt alone, and then finally found these turtles to rear. And then Superfly, uh, was meant to be raised by someone who was always alone, but it was taken away from him really violently. And so you see how this affects them. Yeah, you have this loving environment that, yes, is secluded, and is it perfect? No, of course not. But they're loved and they're cared for, and they have each other, versus Superfly ends up very much alone, and then having to pull together his own group. And then I think one of the once again, you have these, yeah, a lot of times there are similarities between the good guys and the bad guys, to simplify it. But he also, Superfly also gets stuck.
Mhm.
So the turtles get stuck on, we got to get people to like us. How do we get people to like us? And so they end up falling all over themselves, uh trying to do the things that will make everybody like them, instead of just doing what they do.
Right.
But then they find these others, and they're like, hey, how about we don't take out humanity, you guys can come live with us. Very open and caring, and wanting to give everyone else what they've had, which is wonderful. And then all these other characters are like, yeah, we actually don't want to do this. But Superfly, just like the turtles, he's stuck. He gets stuck in his mode, how he's feeling about everything, what he wants. He wants to belong so much that he gets in his own way,
Mhm.
because he only sees one path to getting there.
Yeah.
And also, he is unable to he's unable to let go of the anger of what has happened to him, and who represents the people that did that to him. And so a lot of times, if we can't find ways through anger, we hold on to that anger because we want justice and we want revenge. And then a lot of times, the one who ends up suffering the most isn't the person who did whatever to us, but ourselves. And you see that here, where he is so set on this that he actually loses his potential for a community, for family.
Right. And unfortunately, it's something you see a lot in, not just in comic books and movies and TV shows, but in real life.
Oh
And
yeah.
I think it's something we've talked about before on the this podcast. Every villain starts out a victim.
A lot of times, yeah.
So many times. Well, yeah, not every time.
I would say the
Absolutely.
majority of the time.
Yeah, yeah. Majority of the villain starts as the victim, overcorrects, like way overcorrects,
Yeah.
because I mean, it's nothing wrong with like defending yourself,
Right.
but so many times we see the villain go from being the victim to defending themselves to becoming the aggressor.
Yes.
And that's what happened with Superfly. It's like, all right, fine, humanity doesn't like me, I don't like humanity either. And
Yeah.
it was one of those things where but they still had so much fun with it. Like this movie, it
Yeah.
never
Mhm.
hit that point where I was like, ooh, this is too dark. It always stayed fun. It was a very wholesome movie. I really,
I agree with
really
that.
loved it, because so many movies are so dark now. Everything is so like,
Yeah.
there's so many super dark movies. This movie was actually wholesome, and I'm not gonna lie, it was funny because I was like, man, I looked at the rating, I was like, man, when's the last time I watched a movie that was PG? Wow, like this is nice. movies. Like, yeah, I can watch this with my 4-year-old. This is excellent. I like this. Like, it was, uh,
Aw, yeah, I agree with you. It's a wholesome one. It it hits on some really good topics, some really good themes. It's got a good moral to the story, so to speak. And at the same time, what were we doing? We did something recently where maybe it was Percy Jackson, or there have been a few where it's like, or even with our Cassandra Cain stuff, like certain things feel like they lean toward a younger audience.
mhm.
Um, and that's okay. I mean, things are targeted toward audiences. If you don't have an audience that you're targeting, then your story a lot of times is lacking something. But here's the thing about this one is it it was wholesome, and yet it didn't feel like it was for kids.
It
And at the
wasn't.
same
The
time, it doesn't
soundtrack
feel like
alone.
it's true. Yeah, the soundtrack alone. Maybe that's part of it too. The style of the movie, how it's illustrated,
I'm
how
sorry, I cut
it's
you off.
no, you're good. You're right. I think that is part of it. It does feel like a wholesome story that you normally get for kids, but for adults.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. The music
Oh
and the
yeah.
style, and yeah, there's totally. I mean, isn't Seth Rogen, wasn't this one of his pet projects or something that he
It was,
wanted?
yeah, he actually was the voice of
Yeah.
Bebop.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
He
yeah,
was
yeah.
the voice of Bebop. Yeah, and he was one. Yeah, he's everything this guy's been touching has been gold. I tell you, like,
Yeah, but I mean, okay, maybe he's doing kid stuff these days, but it's hard for me to imagine Seth Rogen trying to do an audience specifically for kid, like Seth Rogen and a like rated G, for example. I can't picture it.
I think he
Maybe
could.
it's happening.
Well, he did. Let's see. He was
Has he done it?
he was in the new Lion King, the live action Lion King.
Okay.
He voiced who did he
Okay.
voice? Pumbaa.
Really?
I think he voiced Pumbaa in the live action Lion King.
I just can't bring myself to watch that.
I haven't watched it yet either. I just the first one, the original is just so good.
It's
It's so
so
good.
good. It's so good. And
Oh
I have a thing with all the CGI animals. I don't know.
yeah,
I'm just like, I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't want you harming animals in the making of a movie or whatever, but they
I
just
get it.
there's always a feel to them that's not quite right
I get
most
it.
of the
I
time. And
absolutely
also I don't want to see Mufasa die
live
like for
action.
real.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't need that. No
No.
one needs that.
Look, okay, when I a distinct memory I have growing up is Star Wars and watching the movie. And so I'm like 6. And I remember watching it and it wasn't for the first time. How do I know? Because I knew Obi-Wan was about to quote unquote die. I don't know if you consider it dying or not, but and so I left the room because I didn't want to watch it. So why would I put myself through the live action version of Mufasa dying? No, thank you. Anyway, tangent over.
Absolutely. No. I
Seth Rogen.
completely I completely feel. But yeah, this movie, like, it was so good. Yeah. It definitely, like, a kid could watch this movie and enjoy it, but it was definitely for I feel
Yeah.
like this movie was made for the people that grew up with it, because they when I was
Yeah.
listening to the music and they were playing like Annie Up and No Diggity and
Oh yeah.
Can I
Oh,
Kick It, like all the different
that is
they
so
even
good.
referenced the second live action Ninja Turtles movie,
Yeah.
because at one point I think a guy gets knocked into a car and it plays Vanilla Ice's Ninja Rap that was on the soundtrack for the second
You know what I
movie.
think it is? They were like, Gen X, millennials, y'all have been through some shit.
They
Here you go.
they need
Here's a
this.
wholesome hug.
They
Here's a
need
hug.
this. Yeah, it's kind of like how Steve from Blues Clues lately has just been popping up, checking in on us lately. It's like, hey guys,
They
how's it?
know. They know we need
How have
help.
how you been? How you been? It's like, Steve, shit's rough. I'm not gonna lie. A lot of stuff was happening at Nickelodeon when you were there, man, and this is hurting us. But yeah, and but yeah, it's just I absolutely loved this, and I Also, really, really liked how everyone had their own story because the turtles had their own story about wanting
Yep.
to be accepted along with April. Master
Mm,
Splinter had his own story about learning to accept humanity and not live in fear of all of them.
yep.
And then the mutants that were with Superfly also learned there's a better way of doing things. And so I love that this was one of those movies where everyone got something out of this. Everyone learned. Of course, Superfly didn't change his ways or anything, so he
Yeah.
didn't really. But everyone else really did walk out of this movie a better individual. And I
Yep.
always that, and I think that's something else that made it wholesome. It wasn't one person over in
Mm,
the shadows, just like I still hate humanity. All of them became like one. They became a really big happy family, and
yeah.
I
Yeah.
really
And then,
love
I
that.
mean, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, they got to go to high school.
Yeah, they got to go to school. They got to go to school, and they were accepted by everybody, which is very different from anything I've ever seen in a Ninja Turtles movie. uh but yeah, and so I absolutely loved it. I hope that everyone goes and sees this movie. Because yeah, I I loved it. I still absolutely love Ninja Turtles. I probably watch the first Ninja Turtles movie once a month.
Wow.
Yeah, like once a month, I watch it. My mom can quote the entire movie from how much I watched it as a child.
Nice.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for nerding out with us. I'm clinical psychologist Dr. Amelia Brown.
and I'm educator and comic aficionado Keaton Hopkins. Check out my TV and movie reviews on YouTube at Team JVS. Check out our website at bat-therapy.com, our Bat Therapy YouTube channel, and follow us on social media. And don't forget our Patreon page at patreon.com/battherapy. See you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.